Welcome to the Gita In Action podcast. My name's Radha, and I'm here with our family of seekers. We're reading through the Bhagavad-gītā verse by verse and extracting its practical wisdom for our everyday lives and being transformed in the process. That's what we're doing here every Monday and Thursday. And last week we celebrated our 2-year anniversary, so that was exciting. And we have so many wonderful things coming up. Thursday, we are launching a fundraiser where we have some merch, some Conscious Collective merch, and we're launching a fundraiser to raise money for our new website. If you've used our website, gotten links from our website, or signed up for a retreat, um, or come to our retreats and loved them, please help support our website so that we can continue to make things accessible for people. That will be Thursday. That'll look out for that. We'll launch that. And then all the things. We have our yoga festival in New Vrindavan this coming weekend. We have Guatemala in November. We have pilgrimage in February. So all kinds of things. And oh, you guys want to know something really cool. Most of you know that we offer free yoga, free online yoga on Tuesdays and Fridays. Karina or Tanmai does that for us. And those classes, I don't, if you haven't been to one of those classes, check one out because they're super nourishing. I'm a person that's used to like beating my body up when I do yoga, but with her, it's like it feels sweet and nourishing. So I really appreciated Tanmai's classes. But we're going to expand those even more. I think we're going to add a couple more free yoga offerings, breathwork offerings onto the schedule. So stay tuned for that. And on Sundays, we have our free guided japa meditation from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m., which is early, understood on a weekend. But we do that intentionally. We do that, that's purposely designed because when we can commit the early morning hours to spiritual practices, we get the most potency. It's the spiritual energy is most potent at that time in the morning. So when we can train ourselves to wake up and connect right away, we will get more benefit. We'll feel that will kind of carry on through the rest of our day. So trying to instill those habits. And those are our offerings. Check out our website and you will see them all. Consciouscollectivelife.org is our website. Consciouscollectivelife.org. Okay, now let's get into our Gita verses for the day. Before we do that, Shakti, would you like to say our prayers for us?
I'll do the prayers
Oh,
this morning
okay.
for her. Yeah, she's
Wonderful.
okay. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jana Jana Salakaya Chakshuranmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane. Vanchakopa tarubhyascha kripa sindhu bhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Thank you. So beautiful. Okay, so we are starting with verse, let's see, 23. Um, 13 or 23. So chapter 13, text 23 is where we're starting. Let me share my screen
Soft, a little loud.
and we can just get right into it. Shraddhanjali, would you like to read this verse for us?
Sure. Upadrasthanumanta cha Bharta Bhokta Maheshvaraha Paramet Meti Kapi Ukto Dehesmin Purushaha Para. Yet, in this body, there is another, a transcendental enjoyer, who is the Lord, the supreme proprietor, who exists as the overseer and permitter, and who is known as the Supersoul.
Thank you. So, if we remember, for the last few verses, Krishna's been talking about Prakriti and Purusha, or widely material nature and the living entity, matter and spirit. And in the last verse, we talked about what happens when the soul wants to enjoy material nature. We associate with it, we become attached to it, we identify with it. And eventually we become so caught up in the experience that we forget who we actually are. But now Krishna says, there's another person here too. There's another conscious being present within the body. And that is the Paramatma, or the Supersoul. And Krishna describes him in this verse as the overseer, the permitter, the maintainer, the supreme enjoyer, and the Lord. And so Krishna's making a very important distinction here. There's the individual soul, us, and there is the super soul. Both are present within the body. And what's interesting is that although the super soul is present within material nature, Krishna specifically describes him as transcendental. So he's here, but he's not caught up in it all, which is very different than us. Because we enter material nature and we want to enjoy it. And then we become so absorbed in the experience. The super soul is present through all of it, but he never becomes identified with material nature. He isn't controlled by material nature. He isn't being tossed around by happiness and distress. He isn't thinking like, boy, I really hope this works out the way that I want it to. So he's present within the experience while remaining completely beyond it. And there's this analogy, we talked about this analogy before of two birds in the tree. This is from the Upanishads. It describes these two birds sitting together in the same tree, and one bird is eating the fruit of the tree, and the other bird isn't eating. He's just watching. And these two birds represent the individual soul and the super soul. And if we think about everything we've talked about in the last few verses, this first bird is us. We're moving through material nature trying to enjoy the fruits of the tree. I like this. I don't like that. I want more of this. And because we're trying to enjoy the fruits, we become caught up in all the pleasure and the pain that comes along with it. But the other bird, the super soul, is right there in the same tree. And he's present, but he's not caught up in eating the fruits. He's witnessing. And the beautiful part of this analogy, I think, is that while the first bird is looking around the tree for satisfaction, just everywhere, like what is going to satisfy me next? The other bird has been beside him the entire time. And eventually the first bird turns his attention towards the other bird, and that's where the real relief from suffering comes. And this brings us right back to what Krishna is saying in this verse. The individual soul and the super soul are both present within the body, but their relationship with material nature is completely different. One becomes entangled trying to enjoy it, and the other remains transcendental while accompanying us through it. And there's something I want to like double click on a little bit in this verse. And this is two words that Krishna uses to describe the super soul. And that is, he says he's the overseer and the permitter. So that means that the super soul witnesses what's happening. He knows our desires. He knows what we're choosing. He knows what we're experiencing. And he permits us to act on our desires within the laws of material nature. And this is an important point because we have independence, but at the same time, our independence isn't unlimited. So we can desire something, we can choose a direction, but we don't independently control material nature. So there's us with our desires and our choices, and then there's material nature that provides the field in which those desires are played out. And then there's the super soul, God in the heart, overseeing and permitting the whole arrangement. But he's not just some cold, distant observer. He's accompanying us as our friend. He's right next to us as our friend. And then the question might become like, why? Why is the Lord accompanying us through all of this? And his purpose isn't just to help us become better at enjoying material nature. In fact, that's not his purpose at all. His purpose is to eventually help us to turn back towards him. Because what we've been doing in that tree is turning towards material nature and saying, please make me happy. You will make me happy. And we've been putting our faith in that. If I get this, I will be happy. This just happened to me this weekend. My husband and I are looking at making a big purchase, which I'll probably announce sometime later, but we're looking at making a big purchase. And it's like very up and down. It's like, who knows if it's actually going to happen. And I could see how attached I am, on the downs. I can feel like I'm not attached, but then when it might not happen, it's like I get very frustrated. Super frustrated. It's like, why isn't this working out? Why is this wasting my time? Because we're attached, because we think that if we get this, if my life circumstances arrange like this, if finally I'm out of this job and able to do what I really love, then I'll be happy. And the reality is, like, that those changes might provide you some temporary relief, if they're about to if they come to fruition. But the reality is that as long as our consciousness is engrossed in material nature, we'll always be subjected to some degree of suffering. Even if that purchase comes through, or even if that job changes and it's exciting for a while, give it some time and there'll be some frustrations that come up around that. Anybody who's been through a big life change and been excited, and then realize, oh, actually, you know what? There are some frustrations around this too. They get it because this is the nature of material nature. And what Krishna's trying to teach us is to stop seeking our enjoyment and satisfaction solely off of that, because it's never really going to satisfy the heart. Only when we start to turn our direction towards Krishna will our heart be fully satisfied. And the beautiful thing is that we're not trying to find a God who's been absent. We're gradually turning towards the person who's been there all along. Even while we've been looking everywhere else for happiness, he's been there. And he's not forcing us to turn towards him. This is important. Love can't be forced. I remember this was one of the first bhakti principles that I learned, because I was in a very controlling relationship and I thought that was love. I thought the fact that he wanted to control every minute of my day meant that he loved me. That's not love. That's control. That's actually born of fear, which is the opposite of love. When you really love someone, you give them space. You give them independence. You give them the freedom to make their own choices. And then if they reciprocate in a loving nature, then there's real, relationship, healthy relationship. So Krishna, he gives us a choice. We can continue to try to enjoy separately, to try to just find all the fruits on the tree and be convinced that if we finally get that magical fruit, we will be satisfied. Which is funny enough, it's like again and again, material nature teaches us that that's not the case, but for some reason, we still don't quite understand. Even all of us sitting here today who come to this class regularly still probably have something in their life that we're convinced that if this just changed a little, I would be happier. When the reality is the only foolproof method to really be fully satisfied in life is to turn back towards that other bird in the tree. Because when we have relationship with God, then our entire life becomes an offering. It doesn't matter if our job is perfect, if our home is perfect, if our kids are perfect. If we're serving, if we're showing up to our roles and responsibilities and relationships in the mood of service to God, then we're fulfilled through that relationship. That relationship alone fulfills us. And the whatever particular service that it is or isn't doesn't bother us so much. It doesn't affect us so much, doesn't bring us so high or so low because we're happy just doing that service. Just like, with my little daughter, like whether I'm changing her diaper or playing Murdungo with her, or it's like, it's all sweet because I love her so much. So when we really love God, life becomes an offering and life becomes sweet. And He's always there. He's always there, patiently accompanying us, giving us opportunities to turn towards Him. Before I move on, does anybody want to share anything? So then there's another question that comes up quite often in spiritual circles, and that is, so if this is true, then does God want everything that happens? If God is in our hearts, does He want everything that happens? If He's overseeing everything and permitting everything, does that mean that everything is His plan? We say that a lot. This is God's plan. So does that mean that every terrible thing that's ever happened is God's plan? That every bad decision I've ever made is God's plan? Which isn't necessarily what Krishna's saying here. Because there's a difference between permitting something and wanting something. Krishna gives us free will. And sometimes we use that free will in ways that aren't really aligned with what He wants for us. People hurt each other, we make mistakes, we make decisions that have painful consequences. So there's a really important distinction here. And that is that everything that happens may not be God's plan, but God can make His plan work through everything that happens. So Krishna being the permitter, it doesn't mean that he's the desirer of every choice that we make. And this is important because otherwise something terrible happens and we end up thinking, well, God must have wanted this for me. We don't have to believe that, but we can believe that whatever has happened, Krishna can still work with it. And this is really practical when we look at our own lives. I see Nancy sitting here who's just shared her story with us a few weeks ago. Like she went through a really terrible time when she was younger with addiction and but this is something I was thinking when she shared her story. Like, she went through a really terrible time, but what did she do with that terrible struggle and time? She used it to dedicate the rest of her life to helping others. So while that addiction may not have necessarily been God's plan for her, he didn't want her to suffer. She was making her decisions within the container of her free will. But then when she decided to turn her life over to God, he used it to to create something really beautiful, which is a preaching practice for her to connect with others and help others that struggle with the same things. And many of us, can relate to this. We all have things in our past that we wish hadn't happened, things that people did to us, things that we did to ourselves, mistakes we've made, and we can't change those things. But we can believe that something good can come from it. Maybe something I went through makes me more compassionate towards someone going through the same thing. I think this when I see abusive relationships. I used to have no compassion for them. Like, how could somebody tolerate that kind of behavior and keep going back to the same person until it happened to me? And now it's like, I totally get it. I totally get it. Doesn't matter how smart you are, it can happen. It can happen. You have more compassion for people that struggle. A mistake that you make can change the whole direction of your life. Or something super painful that you're going through may turn you towards spiritual life in a way that just comfort never would have. So instead of asking, why did this happen? What we can really begin asking is, what can Krishna help me do with this right now? Because we can't change the past, but the past also doesn't get to decide what happens next. And if we get really thoughtful, we'll see that every experience in our life can bring us closer to God. Like, even the small frustration I was experiencing this weekend with, like, this is so unstable. Is this going to happen or not? It's like, I was like, what is God's plan? He just wasted my whole Saturday. I just like tempted to go into that narrative. But at the same time, just to learn to be comfortable, or to be a little less uncomfortable in uncertainty. To understand that not everything is under our control. To understand that regardless of the way things go, I don't have to choose suffering. My happiness isn't tied to that. To understand that even in the moments of life that are frustrating and feel like a waste of time, if we're really connected, we can access a deeper joy. And sometimes those situations push us to do that. In this way, everything in life can become beautiful. And Krishna provides us these opportunities again and again. Stop looking for those extra sweet fruits. You don't have to do that. It's so much work. It's so much pain, because half the time the fruits are sour and bitter and gross. And the other half, they're so good that then you get like crazy looking for more and more. And the happiness that you get is really just the relief from the suffering of just being exhausted looking for more. And then you're back doing it again. It's the craziest thing. He's like, just turn towards me. You'll be deeply fulfilled and satisfied always, on a much higher plane than you could really experience within this material nature. And this is what makes this verse so hopeful. I think, whatever happens through our good decisions, our bad decisions, we've all made plenty of both, I'm sure. Through things that we've chosen and things that we never would have chosen. We've never been spiritually alone in any of it. The other bird has been there the whole time. And he's still there. He's always there. So while we're trying to remember who we are, we're accompanied by someone who's never forgotten who we are. So spiritual life is not about trying to find a God who disappeared. It's about finally turning towards the friend who's been sitting beside us all along. It's quite simple, but we make it so difficult. It's simple in principle. It's actually, it takes a lot of practice and discipline and perseverance. But conceptually, we're just turning back towards God. It's actually much easier than the path that most of us have chosen, which is exhausting and depleting, frustrating. We can choose to be peaceful, isn't it? We can choose to be peaceful. Does anybody want to? Nancy R., please share with us. Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Thank you so much. I was just thinking about how if I have faith, I also have to have some patience. You know, we are in this mode with the material world of ever increasing, you know, instant gratification. You know, I can stream anything I want on television. I order something from Amazon and it's at my doorstep in 3 minutes. And you know, somebody else, I order something from somewhere else and they say it's going to take a week, and I'm like, what's wrong with you? That kind of thing. And the reason I mention that is that I'm not sure of the time frame sometimes for Krishna's mercy. You know, sometimes I have to be very patient, sitting back with knowing that Krishna's there in my heart and with me, and maybe I have to just be patient for some resolution. You know, and prayer meditation helps me to get closer to understanding. You know, maybe what I've been yearning for wasn't good, or maybe I had been hurt. You know, that I've worked with people who have had horrendous abuse. And, you know, where was God when I was being abused? And like, well, God was there crying with you, you know, and maybe needed you to go through this so that you could turn towards that bird in a different way. But I think the timing isn't always what I want. You know, I want an answer right now. You know, I'm doing such good things. You know, shouldn't it just come easily? And that's not for me to say. I have to have that patience. So thank you so much for class today, and appreciate everything. Hare Krishna.
Mm. I love that you brought that point up, because patience, I say patience is a virtue, but for those of us on the spiritual path, patience is essential to any level of progress. Because if we don't have patience, we're in this doer mentality. We're in this controller mentality, where we think that we should be able to make this happen and this should happen for us and we should control everything around us so that it does. But when we start to really develop relationship with God, when we start to lean into that relationship, we start to understand actually better that it's on Krishna's timing. He knows better. He knows better. Even if I feel like I want it to happen right now, actually, I know that divine arrangement is going to be much better. So let me lean into that. Let me stop forcing this. And so it's really patience becomes like a byproduct of that relationship. When we're really spiritually connected, it happens naturally. We become patient. It's not my time. It's not for me to control. Now, what do you think, Shraddhanjali? Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, I love that because patience implies trust. You know, it's actually an expression of trust, not just the word saying, "Oh, I trust Krishna." But if you really trust Krishna, you'll be patient because you trust him to do, the needful. Um, I was thinking too. I've thought a lot about, this whole "it's God's plan," which can veer into spiritual bypassing and all that kind of whatever that means. I I still struggle with that. But you know, things happen. It's like he's not planning it and willing it to all these things to happen. He's giving everybody free will, like you said. They're making the decision to say abuse a child, right? Like bad decision. But Krishna is a permitter because that's what's the use of free will if he stops their twisted free will, like, but he also knows the heart of everyone so well that it almost seems as if he knew ahead of time what that person might do. And people take that to mean that he willed it, but really he knew that abuser's heart so well that he's sitting there going, "Oh my God, I got to give them free will, but they're going to really do bad things, you know."
Mm.
But they're in the material world where everyone's kind of like that. And this is the place they need to work it out. And also, it's not just people against people, it's like nature. Did he plan for a tornado to come and knock down houses? No, but he had set up this sandbox for us to play in with tornadoes in it. And then, so then it's like, okay, what is each heart going to do once that tornado appears? Do they then say, I want out of this material world? I'm going to help my neighbor. I'm going to, or are they, just going to go more deeply into darkness? Anyway, I think about these things because I don't, if someone gets sick, it's like, I don't want to say it's God's plan. It's just the sandbox we're living in has disease, you know? So then what do? We could use our free will to then help relieve the sufferer of the disease. Is that's sort of what I was thinking about.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. To the degree that we're that bird in the tree that's completely uninterested in our best friend who's sitting right next to us, Krishna's like, no problem. Enjoy. I'll even provide the facilities for you to enjoy all the fruits on that tree. I'll keep watering it and nurturing it so it grows nice big fruits for you if that's what you want. But the moment that we decide to turn back towards him, he'll guide us. And that's what the practice of bhakti is. We're trying to tap into that frequency so that we can hear his whisper because we've drowned it out so long that we're no longer even attuned to it. So we have to recalibrate this mind-body instrument so that we can perceive the frequency that he's putting out because it's always there. We're just tone deaf. But when we do turn back, he will personally guide us. He will personally, take that role if we want him to, which is beautiful. And in the meantime, like you said, we're all just playing in this sandbox with our karmic packages, blaming him with our own karmic packages, blaming him. I think this when my daughter will like do something ridiculous, like jump off the table. Even though I'll tell her 10 times not to, she'll do it anyway. And then she'll look at me and she'll cry. And I'm like, it's our small little coffee table. So it's not like our big kitchen table, but it's like, okay, I told you not to do that 100 times. And now you're doing it. And now you're looking at me crying. What are we doing here? Well, Krishna's telling us now, turn back towards me. I'll take care of you. But we don't want to. We want to turn around and do things our way. Thank you. Thank you for all the nice shares. Anybody else before we move on to the next verse? Okay, let's move on to the next verse. This will be our last verse for today. Radhanjali, when you're ready.
Ya evam veti purusham praktim cha guna hai saha sarvatha vartamanopi nasabyo yo biyat jayate. One who understands this philosophy concerning material nature, the living entity, and the interactions of the modes of nature, is sure to attain liberation. He will not take birth here again, regardless of his present position. Yes.
That's reassuring, huh? So this is another summary verse. Krishna, in the past few verses, Krishna's helped us understand like what is material nature, what is the living entity, what is the super soul, and what is the relationship between them all. And now Krishna essentially says, if you really understand this, you become free. You don't take birth again. And he says, really understand, because he's not saying like if you can click the right answer on a test, you don't have to take birth again. You pass your Bhakti Sastri. Good job. He's talking about an understanding that becomes so real that it changes the way that we live, meaning that it becomes realized. And we've been using this movie analogy a lot for the past few verses. So maybe we'll just take it one step further here. You're sitting in the movie theater and you're completely absorbed in what's happening. Okay? You're worried about the characters, you're upset when something goes wrong, you're relieved when something goes right. For just those 2 hours, it can sometimes feel like that world is reality. But then someone reminds you, like, oh yeah, I have an entire life outside this theater. And suddenly, when you remember that, the movie doesn't have quite the same hold on you. It's like you can watch it, you can still participate in the experience, but like, this isn't my whole reality. This happened to me when I read the Harry Potter books. Anybody read the Harry Potter books? I was like a kid and I remember being afraid to like get off of my bed because I thought someone would like put a spell on my feet. I was like so absorbed in this book that I forgot that like it wasn't actually my reality. But somebody reminds you. And this is what spiritual knowledge is gradually supposed to do for us. It reminds us again and again, this material experience isn't the entirety of my existence. It's actually just like a temporary little blip. You're on a journey, a multi-life journey of the soul. And you've just pulled over to the side of the road to get an ice cream cone. And in the meantime, you're obsessed with choosing your flavor and the decor on the wall at the place and the seating that you've forgotten even where you're actually going. Like you've forgotten to even, sometimes you forget to even get back in the car and drive. You're just like so obsessed with everything happening there. When what's waiting for you is like the mega amusement park, but you're just like stuck at this little tiny detour. It's because our real identities doesn't begin with this body and end with this body. There's a spiritual reality beyond everything that we're currently experiencing. And it's not just enough to tell ourselves the material world is temporary. Material world is temporary. Because if this is still the only place where I believe happiness exists, of course I'm going to remain attached to it. We naturally loosen our grip on something when something better becomes real to us. We do this with our children all the time. Like they're playing with something. My daughter loves playing with forks. She'll grab a fork out of the dishwasher when I'm unloading. I'm like, no, don't play with that fork. And she wants it so bad. She's like, no, I'm playing with this fork. And then I grab a spoon. And I'm like, no, take this spoon. And she's like, oh, I actually really like spoons. She can put her own little piece of Cheerio on a spoon and act like she's something big. She's ready to take that spoon. She takes the spoon, she totally forgets about the fork. And I didn't even have to force her. This is what you do with kids. This is what you do with people. The same thing happens with us in our spiritual life. So the goal isn't just to stop enjoying things, stop wanting things, stop being attached. It's to gradually discover a kind of spiritual happiness and relationship that makes our obsession with temporary things less compelling. it just doesn't fill the heart as much. It's just not as enticing. And Krishna specifically mentions understanding the modes of nature here, because the modes help produce all the different experiences that keep attracting us within material existence. And if you're not sure what the modes are, don't worry. We have a whole chapter on it. We'll learn really well what the modes are. But it's one thing pulls me, another thing repels me. One day I feel incredibly motivated. Another day I don't want to do anything. These are the modes. These are the effects of the material modes acting on you. And if we don't have knowledge, we just get pulled around by all of it. Sometimes even thinking that this is me, this is just who I am. But once we begin recognizing that, oh, this is actually material nature operating, I don't have to identify with every impulse that comes through me. I don't have to follow every desire, every mood. I can start choosing how I respond. This freedom begins even before liberation from the material world. And I really like this last part of the verse where he says, regardless of his present position. Because Krishna's not saying, first you need to get your external life perfectly arranged, and then you can become spiritually realized. Many of us think that when we get into spiritual life, like, I need to get rid of these people, these friends, this job is toxic. It's like some changes may be necessary. And we have to have patience for those changes to happen peacefully. But the point here is that we can be in the middle of a super complicated life. We can have responsibilities, a full plate, job, family. Arjuna is literally standing on a battlefield. He's a warrior. So a person can act within material nature without becoming increasingly entangled in it. This can happen. I was just talking to somebody today, this really sincere devotee I was talking to. He always takes this really humble job of cleaning. He always takes this cleaning job. And I'm talking to him like, I think it would be good for you to take like a higher level of leadership. And, I think you'd be really good at it. And he's like, no, I really like the cleaning job because it keeps me humble. He's like, I'm a person who likes the spotlight, so I try to stay out of the spotlight, which is like awesome. Like that's actually super noble and commendable to know. Like, okay, I know that I like to be in the spotlight, so I'm going to purposely choose things to keep me out of it. But what if, but for a person who has like a certain capacity, that they're not stepping into because they're, afraid of getting too entangled in the accolades that come from it. The real test is can you stand in the fire without getting burned? And that may come with time. Like you maybe aren't ready to stand in the fire yet, but at some point we have to push through these things, so that we can really become purified. Otherwise, that energy it's just kind of waiting for us. So we have to take this at our own pace too. This isn't to say just like jump off a cliff that you're not quite ready for, but understand that sometimes the way out is through. And this is the way through. We still act in the world, but we become so attached to Krishna that we don't become entangled by it. This is real liberation. Not to necessarily escape every difficult circumstance, but to stop allowing our circumstances to define who we think we are, and where we think our happiness ultimately comes from. That's true liberation. So maybe this verse, leads us with this simple question, which is, where do I believe my real life is? We say real life. We like to say my real life versus my spiritual life. What do we believe our real life is? Really, it's like my real life versus my temporary life. That should be our language. Because if our temporary experience is everything, then naturally I'm going to cling very tightly to it. Every success becomes incredibly important. Every failure becomes devastating. Every change feels threatening. But if I increasingly understand I'm an eternal soul, my relationship with Krishna is eternal. There's a reality beyond everything that's changing around me. If we really understand that, then we can participate fully in this life without expecting it to be everything. And eventually, Krishna says, that understanding becomes complete enough that we don't even have to come back here again. Because we're no longer looking towards material nature saying, this is where my real life is. We finally remembered where home actually is. This is what we're doing, little by little. This is why we're all here today, trying to do this together. Would anybody like to share anything? Love to have some reflections, takeaways, ways that you're connecting this with what's going on in your lives. Isn't that language funny? Because we all say that, my real life versus my spiritual life. Like, what if we reverse that? It's like my real life versus my temporary life. Because that's really the reality. That's such a relief, isn't it? Our real life is actually our spiritual life.
Hi, Krishna. Radha, I'll just jump in real quick. Sorry I was late.
Please.
So I'm not exactly sure what all we're talking about. But well timed as usual, because I've had a pretty stressful week. And some of it is over like really good events and good things, but just like overwhelm, like at once, you know? So just a reminder that like this is just a little blip, a small section of my whole material experience that will recycle and recycle and recycle. It's so calming, you know. And then I went to a workshop at the temple yesterday about like worry and habits, and how a lot of our habits are driven by that like emotion that then we want to like get a fix to fix, you know. And instead to lean into Krishna and lean into these truths. So kind of like get the same result that we'd want, like back to a peaceful, non-worry state, but change the impetus that gets us there rather than whatever the habit is. Change it to like leaning into Krishna. So thanks for the really timely reminder that like it's all going to be okay. It's just a couple of weeks, you know. Yeah. Hardball.
Thank you. Yeah, what is that statistic? Like, it's like 95% of the things that we worry about throughout the day, like we don't even remember in a couple months. It's like something ridiculous like that. And we've all experienced that. We've stressed so much and it's like we don't even remember these things. And the other thing I remember when I took my first teacher training, one thing that we did was like identify a bad habit that we had, like mine was eating sugar. And when we had the craving for eating sugar, we chanted or meditated. We did some spiritual practice. And it's kind of like what you're saying, like instead of letting material nature kind of run away, instead of us choosing to run away with material nature, we decided in that moment to turn back towards Krishna. And it was really powerful. It's a powerful exercise. You also realize how difficult it is and how attached, absorbed, addicted we are to material so-called solutions. Yeah, Tapashvini.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
I really appreciated your touching on that regardless of his present position. Because as much as I want to turn towards Krishna and have that faith that he'll take care of me, I also find safety and control.
Mm.
And I feel really safe if I can make everything perfect. Before I even try to accomplish something, I feel like I have to set the stage and everything has to be super calm and super perfect and super worked out. And then I can do the thing. And I have to stop and remind myself that it's not my thing. I'm not the doer. And so I really appreciated that regardless of the present position, because I find it helpful to remind myself that I'm not the doer, and that things don't have to be perfect. I don't have to be in control to be safe.
Mm. I don't have to be in control to be safe. That's amazing. And so difficult.
Mm.
But you know, that's funny. It's like in my experience as endeavoring for control, it actually inhibits connection because we become so attached to being the doer, to the controller, that we block that flow of love and mercy. And practically that comes out as like, oh, that manager is cold, that manager's not in touch. If we're not careful, if we're in a controller type position, if we're not careful, it easily comes over to this. We care more about projects than people. I was just having this conversation with somebody the other day. We have to care more about people than projects. And this is hard when our identity is tied to the success of projects. But over time, and this is a journey that I'm taking because I'm a controller, I'm a manager type. We have to prioritize people and trust that Krishna will carry the project if we just prioritize people and give it our all. I was just talking to somebody about this today, somebody that on my team that I work with a lot on setting up retreats. And she, was telling me, I think we should do this and this. And I'm like, I totally agree. I think that's great. Let's do that. And she's like, okay, so here's all the contacts. You can do this. I was like, you know what? I don't have the capacity to do all those things. I think I'll probably just stick with the big things, get the event running, have some nice things going. But those things I probably won't be able to, but I would love if other people do. She's like, I think this is so important. I'm like, I think it's important too, but I know what happens to me if I become the controller, I become the doer, I become so attached to this, and this, and it's like I'm gonna do what I know I can do, and then as people want to contribute and get involved and inspired, wonderful, and if not, that's okay too, because if I become the doer, if I make myself the god of that project, I become frustrated. I become prioritizing the project over the people. And I don't like that consciousness. So I'm just not going to do it anymore. And it's tricky. It's really tricky. What do you guys think? Any other shares or reflections? Erin, I was just thinking, I hope Erin pops her hand up, and then you popped your hand up.
Howdy, Bull. I just want to share. I really appreciate just when you share about these things that are tricky for you, and when you're vulnerable and share really personal things. Like I find so much it's so relatable, and I think it's really easy to just put people in boxes of like, oh, they're so advanced, or like they're on this pedestal, or they're whatever, and I'm like, oh good, she's human too. Like it's very humanizing. And I really, really appreciate that, because I think it's sometimes easy to be like, all these beautiful lessons, but like, well, I'm not a pure devotee, so they don't really apply to me, or like just like ways to kind of like cop out of the application of these principles to my life, like in the here and now. And so I think it's really nice to like everyone in all of our shares, like to really share like that humanness and what we do really struggle with, because I think sometimes, you know, it can be really pretty from the outside, like spiritual life. And then you go through it and you're like, this isn't so pretty, I'm doing it wrong. And it's like, no, 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 it's all part of the process. Um, and then something I've also been thinking about throughout class is just, yes, such messy work, so true. It's just like how much, something I've really been trying to work on is not slipping into just like the dichotomies of like, okay, if I want to master, you know, understanding material nature versus the living entity versus the super soul, then like one is good, one is bad, like this is black, this is white. Um, and so just like thinking about that throughout class and like, you know, just trying to remember that like while like that Maya Shakti is still a servant of Krishna. Like she's still Krishna's energy, and we're here for a reason, right? Like these lessons are for us. They're here. They're coming to us for a reason, and I think it's hard to like think about that and grasp that, because like the first gut reaction is like, okay, material nature bad, Maya bad. So rejection, you know. And I think that really stops us from like progressing and like learning those lessons and like putting ourselves out there to be vulnerable. So I really just, yeah, really appreciate continuing to like go deeper with that, like breaking out of that kind of really simplistic black and white thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the fact that you're all here and you're committed, and I know most of you pretty well on this call. Everybody is, we're all trying like that. And that's what spiritual life is sincerely trying. That's advanced. That's an advanced, and it doesn't mean that our problems are just we're just going to float through life. Even some of the most spiritually advanced people I know, when I get to know them very well, I see, oh, they have struggles too. They have struggles too. They experience frustrations. They notice where maybe they're getting a little bit too entangled and have to pull back and are in the same dance and get it's that's what spiritual life is a dance. And we're just dancing together until we go back home. We're dancing home to Godhead together. Um, but yeah, I appreciate all of your vulnerable shares and sincere effort. So that's what will fuel that's you know, that's what will fuel our vehicle home is a sincere effort. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, my friends. Well, it was wonderful being here with you all today. Thank you for coming and sharing your hearts, and you helped me. You helped me. I I get a lot going on, and I gotta just admit I can't do it all. I can't do it all. I'm gonna do what I can, and I'm gonna turn the rest over to Krishna. And that's my meditation this week. So thank you all, and I'll see you on Thursday. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.